Alright, today we're going to remove the transmission on this 1998 Subaru Legacy Outback. It's pretty straightforward, simple and easy. It doesn't take too much to get it done, so I'll walk you through without showing you all the bolt removal just to save you time. But go ahead and undo this sensor off the top here. You can do the 8mm, remove that here. There's two 12mm bolts off this. Pull that off. Undo your straps that hold the air filter down. Once we get that off, go ahead and plug these three sensors, 1, 2, 3, and slide these out of the way. Once you slide those out of the way, there's this cover that covers on the bell housing here. Go ahead and pull that, and you've got your torque converter bolts. There's going to be 4 of them, 12mm. What I like to use is just a small little 1/4-inch ratchet with the 12mm on there. This one's nice because it has the flex head, so it can actually bend. And as you set it in here, you're gonna pop them 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the same time, go ahead and hold a 22mm on the crank bolt. So hold this here, pop that there, get your torque converter bolts off. That air filter housing was also held on by two 10mm bolts on this, and which are also secured down here by two 12mm bolts. Go ahead and slide that out. And you're going to remove this dog bone, which is a 14mm here and a 14mm there. Put a wrench on this side, zap that side off, and remove your dog bone. Once you get that done, go ahead and remove this bolt here just to get it out of the way. And you've got some 14mm bolts on the bell housing. 1 on this side, another one here for the starter. Let's step around. The ground cable for the power cable for the starter sits here. It's going to be a 13mm. Go ahead and pull that off. Unplug this sensor. Remove this 14mm bolt just above the starter there, and there's going to be one more underneath. Go ahead and remove the sensors that are located at the top of the transmission. They're very simple. Just squeeze this tab and pull it out. 1, 2, and 3. Slide those out of the way. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the axles. Let's remove the tire. Tires are a 19mm lug. This car is on jack stands, but as an extra safety precaution, you can slide the tire right underneath. In case the car does fall down, it'll land on these tires. Next, we're going to remove the axle nut, 32mm. Always helps to have a good impact gun. I really like these Milwaukees. This is the medium size one, but there's also a larger size. And we're going to remove these 2 bolts here. Also 19mm. I set a wrench to hold one side, and on the nut side, go ahead and set your socket. This top bolt is actually oblong shaped, so as you spin this, it's going to actually move this in and out. That helps with the alignment. And if you want, you can go ahead and mark this side here, so when you put it back, it's going to be exactly the same. I'll go ahead and show you how this oblong bolt works. As you can see, as it spins, you can watch. Look right here, and you'll see that thing moving. See it coming out, and now watch it go back in. Hopefully you can see that moving a little bit there. And the bottom bolt has a washer, and the top bolt, this acts as a washer. And as we pull this out, you're going to look and see that bulge on there, and that's what causes that upper arm to move in and out. And now let's do the same exact thing on the other side of the vehicle. And remove the axle nut with that 22mm. And go ahead and remove these two bolts and nuts as you did on the other side. Set the gun on the nut side and your wrench on the bolt head side. And like before, the bottom one has the washer, and the top one, this acts as a washer. And the same thing will show up from this side. As I spin that top nut, you can see it moving in and out. And rather than marking it, what I was able to do, see it coming out as I spin it right there. And now, give me 2 turns, we're gonna spin it back in, see it move in. That's due to that flare on that nut. And I could just see on mine in here where the metal touched this, so I know where to put it when I put it back together. If you wanted to, you could use a marker, draw a line before you remove this nut. That way when you put it back together, you can get that top piece exactly where it should sit. If the bolt doesn't come out super easy, just give it a little tap with a hammer. Now we're going to remove the exhaust. I'm at the back of the vehicle. We're going to pull the rod out of this hanger. It's made out of rubber. Sometimes you can put a little bit of spray in there and make it easier. This one's going to come out not too bad. I've used my thumb, put a little pressure on there, and slide it out. There's going to be another one on the other side, and do the same. Moving forward from the back of the exhaust is another hanger. Go ahead and remove this one from here. Slide it out. And moving towards the front of the vehicle, directly behind the transmission pan, is this hanger here, which also holds the exhaust. There's going to be 2 12mm bolts, 1, 2. We're going to remove those. And I use a 12mm wrench. Just on the last few turns of this top bolt, if you have a ratchet wrench, it'll go much faster. That's going to disconnect that bracket from the transmission, and don't worry about undoing that one. Now the exhaust is laying on the ground. This has been separated, and we're going to go ahead and undo the oxygen 2 sensor while we're here, which just sits at the back of the transmission and goes over here into this catalytic converter. Just a simple little push tab and pull it out. You never want to pull on wires whenever you're doing any of these plugs. If you pull on these, you can separate in there, but you want to be able to get a good grip. It doesn't come easy by hand. I like to use these pliers here, and they're actually for removing hoses. It's one of my favorite tools, but I can actually get a good bite by pushing this tab on the top, getting a good bite in the back. Then as I wiggle back, it comes right off. Feed this back, take it out of that hole, and moving forward now, we're going to go ahead and remove the exhaust manifold from the front of the engine. There's 3 bolts on either side, 14mm. Get yourself an extension wrench and undo 1, 2, 3. And on the other side, 1, 2, 3. Those will drop straight down, and go ahead and just slide it out of the way. And now we're going to continue removing this axle. There's going to be a pin right here. Get yourself a punch, or a T25 torque straight screwdriver works pretty good to fit right on there. And just continually tap it with a hammer with a moderate pressure or moderate force, and tap that pin out on both sides of the vehicle. And there's the pins that we knocked out. Go ahead and save those for later, as you'll need them for reinstallation. and we knocked it out of that hole. As you can see straight through that hole. So when it comes time to put it back on, make sure you can see straight through that hole. For when you knock the pins back in, it'll go easy. And if you want, you can even put a mark from here to here. Make sure you've got it on the same side, because you can accidentally flip it over 180 degrees and it might not line up exactly as it should. You won't get that clean, clear shot going through the hole upon reinstallation. So make sure that you can see straight through it. When it comes time to put on, we're going to pull these axles out now. Depending on where you live, your axle shaft could be rusted in there or kind of seized a little bit. Spray a little PB blaster in there, WD-40, whatever you like. Maybe give it a tap with a hammer. She's nice and free. Grab it on this backside. I really like these Subaru axles. They're pretty easy to do. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this out. Super easy. On this driver's side, I just go ahead and set it here because it's plenty good out of the way. Same thing on this side. Just give it a little tap, loose, make it eject. Now, if it's not coming out all the way and you are having troubles, you can get a pry bar in here, but you want to make sure that you're prying on the actual metal. And we've got it out the back of that hub housing. Just go ahead and tilt it out of the way. Now that it's free from here, it also just slide right off the transmission. Too easy. Set that out of the way. You can see on this side, as this sits inside the housing, there's actually this dust shield. Someone would have pried on that before and actually bent that. So you wouldn't want to pry on that dust shield, but just behind it, and grab that lip with your pry bar if you needed to pry on it to get it out of there. Now moving back up top here, there's also a ground wire that you want to remove early on in the process. It's just a 10mm that attaches right here. This ground wire goes down to the transmission, and it's a good idea just to get that out of the way. Now I like to remove this bracket here because I'm removing this transmission on the ground. You don't really have to, but I've noticed it makes a little bit more clearance. So there's only 2 bolts that hold that bracket on, and it's going to be a 14mm. I take my wrench on one side and go ahead and zip it off on the other with my good old Milwaukee ratchet wrench. This is the extended version. I really like it. They make a shorter one too, which is even easier to get into small places. And let's remove that bracket. Just set it up here. And got the 2 bolts that went in this way. And I'll go ahead and screw the nuts on here through there. That way I can identify and put it back together later. Now we're back underneath the car. We're going to finish removing the starter. As you can see, I've got my ratchet wrench attached to the bottom starter bolt. It's got a little bit of a wobbly in my extension. I'm just going to zip that right off. And I'm going to reach a hand up there just to stabilize it and make sure it doesn't fall down. Okay, looks like that stud held it in place. Let's go up top and pull it out. Plenty of room up here to get this out. Just set that aside. All right, we're moving along good. Just a few more things to do. We'll be ready to pull this baby out. When you lower this transmission out of the car, the transmission fill tube or check level stick usually is going to be in the way and hit here. So go ahead and come right up here and remove that 10mm bolt. And we're going to remove these 2 lines, which is an 8mm. And once those are loosened, I love these hose clamp pliers. Go ahead and just get a bite on there. Give it a wiggle to break the seal that usually occurs. And once you break that seal, pop them off. A little bit of transmission fluid is going to leak out of there, but you can fold those lines up and keep that fluid from coming down too much. I'm going to go ahead and drain the transmission fluid. It's a 17mm bolt, and the reason why I do that is oftentimes it'll leak, especially out of the tail housing. And as that's draining, I'm going to pull that dust shield bolts, remove that so I can get access to the drive shaft. Those are 12mm. Looking towards the front of the car now, we're just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 in the center. Quickly zip those off. It's a nice sunny day here in October, towards the middle, later part of the month. Weather's looking good. We'll just drain the rest of this fluid. I'm gonna pop these last 2 bolts here to drop this dust shield. Slide that out of the way. Now we can see the rear drive shaft. There's a couple ways of doing it. You can either set the e-brake so it doesn't spin on you when you go ahead and crack these 4 bolts. They're also 12mm. If you don't want to get up and down to do it twice, just set that screwdriver in there. That's going to give you your leverage. You can pry it against the vehicle as you spin the wrench to pop those 4 12mm bolts. Once you crack them loose, go ahead and undo the nut. There's going to be a washer on the nut side. If you're trying to crack these bolts and they're just too tight, go ahead and link your wrenches together. Now you've got some leverage here and you can really loosen it right up much easier. I was able to get 3 of them without having to rotate it, but I had to go ahead and lift the tires off the ground so we could rotate to get to the last bolt. And since it's still up in the air, you can either set the e-brake, that'll lock your drive shaft in place, or go ahead and set your screwdriver in here and get your lockdown using that. Okay, that drive shaft's off. Now there's only 2 bolts left holding the bell housing to the engine. 1 on each side, just down here on the bottom. I'm going to undo those 2 bolts. And then what's next is going to be this cross member here. There's 3 bolts here, 3 bolts there, and just this center one is the only one you need to do. But before we undo those, we're going to set a jack under there. That's just looking forward. Okay, we're just going to finish pulling out the dipstick here, and there's this stabilizer bracket that goes across and mounts into there. So it's going to be another 14mm bolt. Go ahead and link your wrenches to crack it open, and go ahead and pop that off. Because the starter's out of the way, that's the best time to get this bolt now. Almost there. And just go ahead and pull the dipstick up and out. The 2 trans cooler lines, which we loosened up those 2 bolts, little 8mm. I'm going to just reach and pull them, undo them from up here. Give them a big enough tug. Go ahead and pull them and tuck them out of the way, these 2 lines. And now, having pulled those 2 transmission cooler lines, we've got them tucked up in between these heater core hoses. That'll keep them from dripping down and making a mess below. Now go ahead and do one more quick check. Make sure everything's been disconnected. We've got all the bell housing bolts done. We've got our ground wire that's been pulled off. You're going to check all your harnesses, make sure that they're undone. There's another one that goes to the O2 sensor down here, and you can see it latches into this wired harness loom there. That goes down to the O2 sensor in the exhaust. Make sure that's undone. And you can see the transmission's already starting to separate from the bell housing, but there's some long studs in there that's going to keep it in place up top. We've got our jack set in place. What I like to do is use a good size 2x6, and that's going to cover the whole entire oil pan there. And the jack has just got a little bit of pressure on there to support that transmission, the weight of it. Now that it's supported, I'm going to come back underneath. We're going to remove the drive shaft. So we've got and that's just going to slide out the tail housing. There will be a little bit of fluid up in this piece. Go ahead and tilt that up and set it out of the way. Now fluid can leak out of the back of this. If you did have this in place, it would keep the fluid from leaking out, but we've drained this, so we're not going to have to worry about that. I'm going to move forward up here and remove the cross member. Now the cross member will stay attached to the transmission if you don't undo this bolt. I'm just going to separate it so it's less cumbersome to handle. We got one more bolt holding this on. Oh, there's one step I forgot to show you guys. We just got to undo the shift linkage. So there's just a little clip here. Just push away from you and slide it up. And then there's a little washer that just came off that sits there. This can come off. We've got to undo this mounting bracket. There's 4 bolts total. These just mounted to the transmission, but these two are going to hold that brace there. 12 millimeter. Let's get those off. So if you actually wait to take these off until you're at this stage of the removal, the nice thing is you can actually fit that wrench up in there. If you do it before, the transmission is going to be higher and you can only do it with a wrench, but this way we've got it with a socket and a ratchet, so it makes it a lot faster. And it can just basically hang there. You got this little clip. Take that off, just let it hang there. Down to our last cross member bolt. Gonna remove that and zip off the last one. Okay, now we're ready to separate the transmission from the engine. Moving back up top, get yourself a pry bar or good sized flathead and just go ahead and separate it. Top is mostly separated. You can see there's a dowel pin there. I'm going to go back underneath. And I like to just put it here. Seems to be pretty strong. Give a little more prying. You see how nice and easy that moves back? Beautiful. Come back a little bit more. We got a separation. And there's 2 studs that hold it on the bottom on either side. You can see the other stud there. Once we clear those studs, we can begin to lower the transmission. Give it another pry. Beautiful. Now you can see that the lip's hanging up on this cross member. But I'm going to go ahead and lower the jack a little bit. nice and slow here. And we're just about to have it coming on down. I'm going to set this phone down so I can finish pulling this away from the cross member and getting it all the way down here. It's just almost there. There we go. It didn't take much more after that. Just gave it a little extra push backwards. Use the second hand to stabilize it here, and another hand to loosen the jack. Go ahead and drop it all the way down. Now she's sitting close to the floor, but there's not enough room to get it out of the car. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get a jack, lift the car up high enough to clear this out of here, and then we'll slide the transmission out. Okay, we've got the car on the jack stands. We set some blocks underneath the jack stands to get it up high enough for this transmission to fit. As you can see, that little U that goes right here makes a nice spot. That gives us enough room to pull the transmission out. I'm going to take it all the way out of the car. And let's go ahead and remove this torque converter. I'm just going to grab it both sides and pull it straight towards me. And the reason why I pull it out now is it makes the transmission lighter and easier to handle. Some fluid will drip, so I've just got a rag there to catch it. And Subaru's kind of weird. They're one of the only guys who do this with this extra shaft. I'll go ahead and show you how that goes on there. There's only 2 ear tabs, one on this side and one on the other. But only one side has these 2 little ears, which is a little clip that goes in there. So the guys at the junkyard, when they pulled mine, they didn't actually remove that sleeve, so it's still sitting in the transmission. And I've just got me a little pick here. I'm going to reach in there and grab one of those ears. Now I can go ahead and pull it out. And now that we've got that, you can see this retainer clip sits in that groove and locks it into those little ears that stick out. And this retainer clip from the junkyard is actually broken. You can see it snapped right there, whereas the other piece is sticking up. So I'm going to take this clip, put it on here, and keep it with my other torque converter. And if you needed to remove it, I'm just going to use a little pick or something to push that in, and then it'll just pop right out of there. So those guys at the junkyard really bent up this clip. I don't think they knew that it had a sleeve. Anyways, we've got a pick. We're just going to stick it in here, stick it in there, move those little ears in, and it should pop right out. There we are. And I'm just going to go ahead, because there's like a bearing race in there, I'm going to keep the same one with each torque converter, and I'll just switch out this clip. So here's actually a bonus clip. These 2 ears at the top are actually the same size. You can see that's like a plastic seal. But anyways, we've got one that's taken apart over here, and essentially you're looking at what's going on the inside of the transmission. That's going to slide and slip all the way into the back, and when you look in there, you can see 2 ears. I know you can catch it just there. Actually on the opposite side is one as well. And so when you install this torque converter, you got to make sure that those are lined up, and I'll go ahead and show you how to get that. Make sure you've got it seated all the way. Alright, so this is the old transmission. We check out those numbers, TZ10, and they are an exact match with the replacement transmission. Now in this particular year, 1998, mid-year, they introduced a different number, which was TZ, I believe, 1A, and that was a little bit different. It had 2 speedometer sensors. It also has a transmission filter that connects here. Because of the 2 speedometer sensors, as far as I know, they're not compatible. Anyways, this is the 1998 exact match. Now these guys at the junkyard, you know, quick and easy, go ahead and cut that. We're just preparing this to get everything installed, so I'm going to remove these. They did leave the dipstick in when they removed it from the car, and you can see that As I said before, that does touch on the underside of the car, so they broke the loop here. We'll just go ahead and swap that out and then set it up on our jack, slide it back under the car. Whenever you are doing any kind of swap, it is a good idea to set both units side by side. That way you can compare them and make sure that everything's the same. You do little things like check the pin connectors, make sure you've got the right amount, you know, make sure all the connectors are the same. With transmissions, sometimes you might have a different, you know, plug-in or whatnot depending on the application, but this one we know it is an exact match. Anyways, I am doing this job by myself, so I just went ahead and walked this transmission over, waddled it onto the jack here, and we've got it sitting on that board down there. I gave it a couple pumps so I can see that it's balanced. I'm going to go ahead and lower it back down now and slide it underneath the car. I'm going to show you how to put that torque converter in there and make sure you've got it seated all the way properly. Take a note of these two pieces. If you look on the inside, you can see where those ears are, and they're sticking right now at this position here. So I'll line up those ears to match up with that position to initially start it to get it in. We'll set the camera here. Got my ears facing in that general direction. Once you get it in there, start spinning it just a little bit, back and forth. There's one click in. There's a second click. And essentially, if you look at these ears as they rotate, if it went in any more, it would hit that lip there. So we know we've got it in far enough, because that's as far as it will go. Let me see if I can fix this brightness here. And if you look at it from a side view, the way this ear and the bell housing, you could even fit a card in between there. So it's basically almost exactly flush with this. This ear is almost exactly flush with the bell housing, just a little bit in. And as you can see, when it spins, you look at this mark there, it looks like it's almost a hit. If it went in any further, it would basically hit it. So you know you're good, because we're pretty much exactly flush with that from the bell housing to the ear. We just pushed it in, gave it a little bit of a wiggle, felt it click once, felt it click maybe twice. Good to go. The way this ear sits, it's like right in that gut of that bottom cutout. So looking at it from this angle here, you can see how it just fits in there perfect. It looks like it's perfect. If you had any more of a gut or any more of a gap in there, you know you weren't all the way in. Once you see it sitting in nice and close like that, you know you've got it. Let's slide it under the car. As you feed the transmission under the car, if you can get this ear centered up with that bracket there, that undermount, then you're going to be nice and centered when you lift it up. Probably the hardest part of doing a transmission job is getting them married again, the transmission to the engine. So go ahead and get it nice and close. I'm gonna start pumping it up. And actually, before you start pumping it up and before you've slid it underneath of the car, make sure you've got the transmission nice and balanced on that piece of wood. Go ahead and jack up the jack about, 5-6 pumps. That way when you get up to height, you're also balanced up there. That way you're already in position, so when you go back in underneath the car and you do pump it, it is ready. And if you look at this block of wood, it kind of just gives you an idea about where the balance point is. It's going to be right on the front of the transmission. The balance point's right up in this area here. Now I've got the transmission in place, so it's ready to slide up in there like a glove. I'm going to go ahead and let the car back down. What I have found is on this support bar, on this aluminum piece, if you jack it up kind of where this A-frame is here, if you jack it up right there, it's actually going to lift both sides of the car, which is pretty cool. So you can sort of do them both at the same time. I'm just going to go ahead and lower it down now and get it back on these jack stands. So the car is lowered back on the jack stands. We don't have to jack up the transmission as high to get it back into place, which is much safer due to the setup that we got here. Not a proper transmission jack or nothing like that. But anybody can do this in their backyard or the garage, whatnot. It's good to have a concrete floor. And after I lowered the car down, I did get off a little bit center. So just go ahead and take yourself a pry bar or a screwdriver, set it underneath your jack, and then when you go like this, you can actually get the whole transmission to move over so it's in the center line of the car. And that's looking much better there. I'm going to start pumping it up. Almost there now. Once we get this bell housing to clear the frame here, I'm going to begin walking it this way. That way if it does fall, this lip will catch onto here. And continue pumping it and pulling it towards the front of the car. And you're going to look to line up these studs on each side with these holes. As you jack up, start to line up these holes. And that's going to be our goal, is to get it threaded into here and into here. Then we've got support on the front side. We're looking really good. That stud's just about in position on each side. Got my leg down here and I'm actually pumping like this to get it up, which is cool. And I just give a little pull on the jack to make it move forward. This nice hard ground makes it easy to roll. So let's see how close we are on this stud. I'll go ahead and pull it forward just a little bit. Give it a little pump. Almost there. And since I am filming this by myself, I'm just going to finish mating those two together. You can hear the jets flying in the background. We're not too far from Buckley Air Force Base. They're pretty cool to watch fly by. Man, those engines sure do roar. If I wasn't a mechanic, I'd be a fighter pilot. Anyway, this stud here is pretty much in position, and I've got to get the whole unit to move towards the engine. So I've just got a screwdriver. Don't let this stuff intimidate you. I'm going to stick it right here in front of the jack. This time I'm going to pry forward towards the engine to get that stud to go into place. If I had a little bit longer pry bar, it'd make it easier. I just don't want to go dig it up, but I know this one will work. So we've got that side locked on. I just finished getting this one here. Now I was easily able to get that stud lined up and started, but this stud was just a little bit low comparison to the hole. So I got me a pry bar and just lifted it up a little bit, and it moved up real easy. And then with my other hand, I used my screwdriver and put it underneath of there and rolled the jack forward. Like that. And I got it onto the stud. So we'll just finish bringing them together. And get the old screwdriver. Give it a roll forward. And as you can see, as I roll it forward, they're starting to mate up real nice. And it's just a matter of keeping them aligned and even. There's a little bit more of a gap up top as compared to the bottom. So I'll give the jack a little bit of a pump just to lift that rear end. And as I do that, they come even again. And I'll continue moving them together. Rolling nice and easy. Never having to force nothing. Looking good. Almost there. Just a little bit more and they'll be together. And I just gave the jack a little pump, a little bit more shimmying forward, and we've got that stud all the way through. Let's put this nut on there just to hold it into place. And it's not quite all the way together up top. Just above where I'm tightening this bolt, there's a dowel pin right there. And once that dowel gets into that hole, that really helps support the two of them together. So I'm going to go up top, I'm going to put an extra bolt through here, and that's just going to help bring them together. And then I'll get them mated all the way to solid and start installing the bolts. So there's still a gap up here, but where the starter is, I'm just going to put a bolt in there and take it back out. But our goal is just to get these to mate up flush. We want to make sure that it goes together even, so there's even space all the way around. Never pinch it. As I'm doing this one bolt, I can see that it's coming together even. Got a little bit more of a gap here, so let's take this side in. I'm going nice and slow because it is a power tool and I don't want to pinch it. You can sort of feel that it's going in smooth, you can hear it. And check the gap underneath, make sure it's the same. Get a little bit tighter on that side than this side. Let's bring them in together. And they are mated. We're in. So that was actually really easy. All by myself, not bad at all. And now I'll walk you through each step of putting it all back together. So these bolts just came in here to bring it together, but I can go ahead and leave that one, but I'm gonna take this one back out because we need to do the starter. So we've got that top bolt tightened up nice and good. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the two bottom bolts here. One of my favorite tools is this wobbly right here. Makes it easy to get into angles where you can't always. Let's tighten this bottom first one. And I'm going to get the bolt on this other side. Which is good. The transmission and the engine are now mated. They're going to stay together. I want to get this jack out of the way so we've got more room to work. So next step here is I'm going to lower it back down because I know it won't separate here, and we'll put that bracket back on for the shift cable. Meet you on the other side. So if you put this cable or this bracket back on after you've lifted up the transmission, you've put the cross member back on, you're gonna have to use a wrench to do it. So if you just do it now, it's quicker and easier because you can use your little ratchet to do it. So just set that into place and get your, this bracket only goes one way.